Yeah, there we go. Okay, trying that again. Famous and infamous ships of the U.S. Navy from 1797 to 1984. This is part 2. As I said, we left off with a Helena during World War II, so we're starting today with the Squalus. The Squalus is famed for the rescue of her survivors when the Squalus sank on May 23, 1939. She sank off the coast of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, due to a faulty main induction valve. 33 men survived her sinking in the forward portion of the ship, saved by a secured bulkhead door. 23 were killed. The sub was 240 feet below the surface. She was located by the submarine Sculpin, and her survivors were saved using the McCain rescue chamber lowered from submarine rescue ship Falcon. Squalus was raised 3 months later, repaired, and named the Sailfish. And here we've got, on the bottom right, we have a Gawain Squalus that's commemorating the commissioning. And here on the right, we have when it was raised, it was going to be, no one knew it was going to be renamed at the time. So Squalus is marked out, and it now says Sailfish. It's ready again. And this is a Mueller cover dated May 15th, 1940. Our next famous ship is the USS Wasp, famed for her actions in World War II. Wasp made 2 trips to England and the Mediterranean, delivering Spitfire aircraft for the defense of Malta. Transferred to the Pacific, she supported the initial landing at Guadalcanal. On September 15th, 1942, while covering Marine troop transports headed to Guadalcanal, Wasp was hit by 2 torpedoes fired by I-19. She was lost with all 193 crewmen killed. Over on the left, we have a Mueller cache cover posted aboard the Wasp on April 25th, 1940, to commemorate the commissioning of the ship. And on the left, we have a picture of her burning after she was torpedoed. USS Sims, named for her loss during the Battle of the Coral Sea on May 7th, 1942. Sims and Neosho were sailing detached from the main U.S. fleet when they were misidentified as a carrier and escort by a Japanese aircraft. The 2 ships were attacked by 78 enemy planes. Sims was sunk when 2 bombs detonated in her engine room. Only 16 of her crew survived, and they were rescued by the Neosho. Here we have a Wydan cover posted aboard the Sims on October 20th, 1939, and the killer bars show that it was in the Cristobal Canal Zone at the time of the posting. It was the Neosho, famed for her loss at the Battle of Coral Sea. Neosho was a member of Task Force 17, centered on New Yorktown. On May 7th, 1942, Neosho was detached along with the destroyer Sims en route to New Caledonia, where they were misidentified. Again, those same 78 aircraft attacked, of which 3 were shot down, but Neosho was hit by 7 bombs and had a dive bomber crash her. She was on fire and was threatening to break in 2. The destroyer Henley was detached from the main U.S. force and took aboard the 123 survivors that were from both the Sims and the Neosho and sank the boiler. Here we have a Crosby cover. The cover was posted aboard the Neosho on March 15th, 1941. Tautog. She's famous for her performance in the Pacific in World War II. She was also at Pearl Harbor during the Japanese attack. Tautog sank 26 ships, including Japanese subs R-30 and I-28. They had fired at the Tautog but had missed her. And she also avoided a circular run of one of her own torpedoes. On the upper left, We have a beautiful Wigan commissioning on July 3rd, 1940. Below that is a Mueller commissioning, also dated July 3rd, 1940. And then over on the right, we have a Gordon Shaw commissioning cachet, also July 3rd, 1940. You can see I love the fish. This is the USS Kearney. Famed for the Kearney incident, Kearney was assigned to the Neutrality Patrol, which had been expanded into all aid short of war, convoying merchant vessels between Newfoundland and Iceland to support England. On October 16th, 1941, a German sub-Wolfpack sank 3 merchant ships in convoy SC-48. Kearney, then in port at Reykjavik, was ordered along with 3 other U.S. destroyers to assist the overwhelmed Canadian escorts. Kearney dropped numerous depth charges without success. On October 17, 1941, Kearney was hit by a torpedo from U-568, which killed 11 and wounded 22. Kearney made port at Reykjavik and then returned to Boston for repairs. On the right, we have a photo from the archives that show the damage from the torpedo that hit the Kearney. And on the right, we have the first day mail service cachet by Gao Eng, dated October 16th, 1941. USS Washington, famous for her engaging in shipping of the battleship HIJMS Kirishima on the night of November 14th, 1942, during the Battle of Guadalcanal. On the lower right, we have a photo that was taken during the battle off Savo Island, showing the Washington firing on the Kirishima. The low elevation of the barrels show how close the range was, 8,400 yards. Left, we have a cover posted aboard the Washington on December 7th, 1941, with a cachet by Stale. The USCS confirms that this postmark is an original December 7th. Here we have the North Carolina. The ship is famous as the first battleship commissioned in the U.S. Navy since 1923. North Carolina saw action during the invasion of Guadalcanal and the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August of 1942. North Carolina was hit by a torpedo on November 15th, 1942. As with other battleships in the Pacific, her role was largely gunfire support for amphibious landings, and she was present for landings at the Gilbert and Marshalls, Hollandia, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. On the right, you have the commissioning cachet by Gao Eng, posted aboard the North Carolina on April 9th, 1941, with all of her information. And then over on the left, we have a looking up to and aft at the dry dock to show the torpedo hole on the side of her hull. USS Hornet. This is a Yorktown class carrier. She's famed for launching the Doolittle raid on April 18th, 1942. The raid consisted of 16 U.S. Army B-52 bombers. Hornet launched the bomber some 600 miles west of Japan. She also participated in the Battle of Midway and so sank the cruiser Mikuma. Hornet was hit by enemy aircraft during the Battle of Santa Cruz Island on October 27th, 1942, and she was sunk by Japanese destroyers. On the left, we have a commissioning cachet by Mueller posted aboard the Hornet on October 20th, 1940. I love these, the Wasp and the Hornets that he did with little planes as bees are just absolutely brilliant. On the right, we have the sailor mail posted aboard the Hornet. February 17th, 1942, by an M.J. Dabney with a naval sensor mark. Dabney survived the loss of the Hornet. USS Massachusetts, South Dakota class battleship. She was famed for her actions during Operation Torch, Allied amphibious landing in North Africa, and November 8th, 1942. Massachusetts was the flagship for Admiral Allen. She was the flagship for Admiral H.K. Hewitt in the eastern portion of the operation off of Casablanca. The French battleship Jean Bart opened fire on the Massachusetts with her 15-inch guns, but was quickly put out of action. 2 French destroyers and a cruiser were sunk at the time. Down on the lower right, you can see anti-aircraft fire chasing 4 French fighters away from an American spotting plane during the early mornings of November 8th, 1942 at Casablanca. On the left, we have a sailor mail posted aboard the Massachusetts on October 9th, 1942 by Coxswain James F. Wick with a naval sensor mark. The killer bars read Free Navy Mail. USS Juno. Juno is famous for her loss just after the Battle of Guadalcanal, fought on November 13th, 1942. Juno was hit by a torpedo during the battle, causing a severe list and the loss of 1 screw. While retiring and with surviving ships, Juno was torpedoed by Japanese submarine I-26 and sank in 20 seconds after a massive explosion. Assuming there were no survivors, the remaining ships sailed on and maintained radio silence. More than 100 Juno crewmen survived the loss of the ship and were in the water for 8 days waiting for rescue. By the time help arrived, only 10 men were still alive. All 5 of the Sullivan brothers were lost. As a result, the Navy changed its policies, with brothers no longer being able to serve on the same ship. All right, we have a photo of Juno that was autographed by Seaman Second Class Frank Holmgren. He was one of only 10 survivors. And over on the left, we have sailor mail posted aboard the Juno by Sailor First Class Alden Graham on September 26, 1942. Graham was killed when the Juno was sunk. Here we have the USS Growler, famed for her loss of her commanding officer, Howard Gilmore. On the 3rd patrol, Growler was near Guadalcanal on February 7th, 1943. She made a surface attack on a 900-ton Japanese provision ship, the Hayasaki. Hayasaki. Growler rammed Hayasaki amidships at 17 knots, disabling the forward torpedo tubes and bending back 18 inches of the bow. I think it's supposed to be 18 feet. Under heavy machine gun fire at close range, Gilmore and 2 others were wounded, and 2 were killed. Unable to leave the bridge, Gilmore ordered clear the bridge, then take her down. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his sacrifice. On November 8th, 1943, Growler, in company with Hake and Hardhead, attacked a Japanese convoy off the Philippines, and Growler was sunk. Here you have a photo on the left that shows, you can see how the damage to her bow, where the bow shows that it comes forward and then bends over to the left. And down here on the lower right, we have a galleon cachet commemorating the launch, dated November 22nd, 1941. More elusive ships to get coverage from, the USS Wahoo. Famous for the aggressive tactics of Colonel Mush Morton, Wahoo was one of the most successful U.S. Navy submarines during World War II. Morton took command on December 2nd, 1942, saying Wahoo is expendable. We will take every reasonable precaution, but our mission is to sink enemy shipping. On January 24th, 1943, off New Guinea, a Japanese destroyer was engaged and forced to beach itself. The following day, a troop transport was sunk. Morton surfaced and sank 20 lifeboats filled with the survivors, some of which were Indian POWs. Wahoo sank 2 more freighters the same day, then a tanker and a freighter the following day. Morton was awarded the Navy Cross. Wahoo sank 9 ships in the Yellow Sea between March 19th to the 29th of 1943, and what was the most successful submarine patrol date to date. A Japanese anti-submarine patrol aircraft sank Wahoo in the Straits of La Perouse on October 11th, 1943. On the left, there's sailor mail posted aboard the Wahoo on July 11th, 1942 by Torpedoman's mate, First Class Donald McSpadden. Cover is marked as free mail and has a naval censor mark. McSpadden was killed when the Wahoo was sunk. On the lower right, we have a Gawain cachet, which is commemorating the keel laying of the submarine, with the killer bars reading USS Wahoo, keel laid. Still in World War II Navy, we have USS Alabama, famed for her role in the various South Pacific island hopping invasions of Japanese territory. Alabama participated in shore bombardment off the Gilberts, the Marshalls, the Carolines, New Guinea, and the Marianas, Saipan, and the Philippines. Repaired at Puget Sound after weathering a typhoon in December of 1944. Shore bombardment at Okinawa followed. On the upper left, we have a cover addressed to President, who would have been FDR, commemorating the launch of the battleship, dated February 16th, 1942, postmarked at Portsmouth, Virginia Navy Yard Station. Cover is marked as authenticated from President Roosevelt's personal collection by H.R. Harmer, Inc. The cover is autographed by the sponsor, wife of Senator Lister Hill of Alabama, and also signed by Admiral Felix Gygax as commander of the Norfolk Navy Yard. Oh, right. We have a cover posted aboard the Alabama on September 2nd, 1945, with cachet commemorating her presence off of Tokyo for the Japanese surrender. And then we come to the Charles Osborne. The ship is famous for being the flagship of Captain Arleigh Burke's Little Beavers, Destroyer Squadron 23, which became the most celebrated U.S. Navy destroyer squadron. On October 31st, 1943, Charles Osborne and Desron 23 bombarded Burma and the Shortland Islands in preparation for the amphibious landing at Empress Augusta Bay. The following night, a cruiser force sent by the Japanese to forestall the landing was engaged, sinking a cruiser and a destroyer. On November 24th, 1943, Charles Osborne and Desron 23 intercepted a Japanese force off Cape St. George, sinking 23 Japanese destroyers and damaging a fourth. On the upper left, there's a scoreboard painted on the side of the ships. Shows you how many planes and other things that they have taken out. On the lower right, there's a penalty cover posted aboard the Osborne on May 16th of 1943. USS Exodus, famous as the lead ship of a new class of aircraft carriers, free from pre-war treaty size and armament limitations. The ship was much larger. It participated in major Pacific amphibious operations in World War II. On the left, we have a female cover posted aboard Essex from April 21st, 1943. On the lower right, we have a picture of the Scout bombers and F-6S fighters on deck of the ship. USS Harder was a Gatto-class submarine, famous for her motto, "Hit 'em harder," and the loss of the ship. Harder departed Fremantle on her 6th war patrol in 1944 in the company of Hake and Hato. Lower right, we have a Gawain cachet cover posted in December 2nd, 1942, commemorating the commissioning of the submarine. And we go on to the Iowa. Here on the left, we have sailor mail dated August 30, 1945, posted aboard the Iowa by Lieutenant Commander Hall. The cover has an occupation of Japan commemorative cachet. The location of the ship shown in the killer bars is Tokyo Bay. The cover also has a naval sensor mark. Lexington, famed for her performance during World War II. Carrier earned 11 battle stars. To the right, you can see a Hellcat coming in to land. And on the lower right, we've got the cover that was posted aboard the Lexington, dated June 27th, 1972, commemorating the carrier's 300th deck landing. It is autographed by the captain, Jack E. Davis. USS Princeton. It was famed for its loss to Japanese aircraft. Tank was 237 crewmen lost. On the left, we have sailor mail posted aboard the Princeton on September 10th, 1944 by Seaman Second Class Joseph Danick with a naval sensor mark. Danick survived the loss of the ship. And over on the right, we have a picture of a F-6F-5P Hellcat from the VF-23 that crashed on landing and breaking into 2 pieces. Here we have the Yorktown. Famed for her performance in the Pacific in late World War II. And although she was hit by a kamikaze in March 18th, 1945, she remained on station off Okinawa, leaving only to launch aircraft, which helped with the sinking of the battleship Yamato in April of 45. On the lower right, we have a cover posted aboard the Yorktown on October 5th, 1945, by Lieutenant F.C. Sadowich of Bombing Squadron BB-88. The cachet confirms the Yorktown was then in Tokyo Bay. The artist is unknown. USS Johnston, famous for her actions in the Battle off Samar during the operation of Tappy 3. Taffy 3 came under fire from a significant Japanese surface force, which had been undetected. This force included super battleship Yamato, the battleships Nagato, Kongo, and Haruna. Johnston, along with 2 other destroyers, 4 destroyer escorts, and a limited aircraft aboard the fleeing CBEs, were severely outmatched. Johnston made a smokescreen and then emerged from it, firing guns and torpedoes at the oncoming enemy ships, managing to sink the cruiser Kumano. She remained in action until all her guns were silenced and the ship was sinking. Over here to the left, we have sailor mail posted aboard Johnston by machinist mate 3rd class Warren C. Trotman on July 6th of 1944. The cover has a naval censor mark with the initials JKB, who was Lieutenant Junior Grade John Beschel. Beschel was killed aboard the Johnston. However, Trotman did survive the loss of the ship. We have the Tang. Tang is famous for her performance during World War II in the Pacific. She sank 24 ships in less than 13 months. Left, we have a cover posted on October 15th, 1943, to commemorate her commissioning. Then we have the St. Lo, the ex-Midway. She's famous for her loss off the Battle of Samar as part of the unit Taffy 3. Originally commissioned as Midway, the ship was renamed St. Lo on October 10th, 1944, to free up the name for the new carrier being constructed. St. Lo survived the attack by heavy Japanese surface ships on Taffy 3. However, the ship was struck by a kamikaze later that day, and it was the first organized kamikaze attack of the war. Here on the upper left, we have a cover to Richard Hamilton, dated October 11th, 1944, posted aboard the St. Lo. The naval censor marked with the initials RAN for Lieutenant Junior Grade Robert Nolan. Both men survived the sinking of the St. Lo. The bottom left is registered sailor mail posted aboard Midway from Lieutenant Kenneth Place, dated April 20th, 1944. The naval censor mark MEH is from Lieutenant Martin E. Hefferman. Place was killed. Hefferman survived. And here on the right, we have sailor mail posted aboard Midway from December 12th, 1943 by machinist mates William A. Holmes. The naval censor mark is LCJ, Lieutenant Junior Grade Lawrence C. Johnson. Both men were killed when the St. Lo sank. Go on to the Cassin Young. She's famed for her actions during the invasion of Okinawa. In late March 1945, she provided gunnery support for American troops. The ship was also used as on radar picket against kamikazes. In April of 1945, she shot down 5 kamikaze aircraft. However, one plane succeeded in crashing the ship, killing 1, wounding 59. Repaired in Ulithi, Cassin Young returned to her picket position on 5/31. She was hit again by a kamikaze on 7/30, 1945, killing 22 and wounding 45. Over here on the left, we've got a photo showing the damage from the July 1945 kamikaze strike. And in the lower right, we have sailor mail posted aboard the Cassin Young on July 6, 1945 by RM 3rd Class Milton Eisenman with a censor mark. Eisenman survived the first kamikaze attack on the Cassin Young. However, he was transferred to the USS Callan and was killed when that ship was sunk by a kamikaze strike on July 29th, 1945. Here we have the Franklin, famous for the efforts of her crews to save the ship despite horrific casualties and damage. On March 19th, 1945, while Franklin was only 50 miles off the coast of Japan, a lone enemy bomber succeeded in hitting it with 2 bombs while her flight deck was crowded with fully armed and fueled aircraft. Losing power and on fire, the ship took a 13-degree list to starboard. After a 6-hour struggle, power was restored and the fires contained. The ship safely made it back to Ulysses and ultimately back to the States. But 807 men were killed, 487 were wounded, of a crew of 2,600. It had 2 medals of honors, 19 Navy crosses, 22 Navy stars, and 234 letters of recommendation were awarded to the crew. On the lower right, we've got a photo showing Vice Admiral Aubrey Fitch giving awards aboard the still damaged flight deck of the Franklin. And on the left, we have sailor mail posted aboard Franklin on March 8th, 1945 by Sailor First Class Robert R. Nelson with a naval bomber sensor mark. Naval sensor mark. Nelson was killed during the bombing. USS Laffey. Laffey is famous for surviving numerous hits by kamikazes. On April 16th, 1945, she was on radar picket off Okinawa when she came under attack by 4 dive bombers, all of which were downed. Over the next 62 minutes, 18 additional kamikazes attacked. The aftergun turret was hit and destroyed when its magazine exploded. Laffey's show an aircraft, but was crashed by 5 others, with an additional 8 aircraft narrowly missing the ship. 32 crewmen were killed, 71 were wounded. The ship's rudder was jammed to 26 degrees to port, and despite the severe damage, Laffey survived and became known as the ship that wouldn't die. On the left, we have a photo showing the starboard side view of the number 3 5-inch mount with the damage from the kamikazes. The lower right, we have sailor mail posted aboard the Laffey on March 15th, 1945 by Lieutenant Junior Grade R.T. Storm with naval sensor marks. Storm survived the kamikaze attacks. LST-507, if you saw the Operation Tiger along with Operation. The ship is famous for her loss in the disaster off of Slapton Sands. We lost more naval sailors off of that and soldiers off of that ship than we actually lost for Utah Beach, which is where they were practicing going to. This is a V-mail dated 4/15/1944 from Sailor 3rd Class Samuel Lamb aboard the LST-507, complete with the envelope. Lamb is one of only 23 survivors in the sinking of the ship. The Gambier Bay, also famed for her battle off Samar, is part of Taffy 3. Have a sailor mail from pharmacist mate 3rd Class Robert Golich, posted aboard the Gambier Bay on October 4th, 1944. The naval sensor mark RBE, who is Lieutenant Richard B. Elliott. Ehrlich was wounded but survived the sinking, as did Elliott. Here we have the Missouri, who's famous obviously for the surrender of Japan and Tokyo Bay, where everything is signed. On the above, we have a cover posted aboard the Missouri on 9/11/1947, commemorating the crossing of the equator while on presidential cruise with Harry S. Truman, who has autographed the cover. The artist is unknown. Over to the right, we have a number 10 sailor mail posted aboard Missouri by Lieutenant Commander J.L. Laird on 9/2/1945 with a special Japanese surrender cancel. USS Maddox, famous for the Tonkin Gulf incident. Maddox was with the 7th Fleet off of Vietnam in 1964, ordered to patrol waters close to the North Vietnamese coast on an intelligence gathering mission. And 3 torpedo boats approached, fearing an attack. Maddox withdrew and fired 3 warning shots at the torpedo boats. Gunfire was exchanged, the torpedoes launched. They missed the Maddox, which in turn hit 2 of the vessels with 5-inch shells. Maddox withdrew his aircraft, engaged the torpedo boats, which were severely damaged. Maddox and Turner Joy were ordered to resume operations in the Gulf of Tonkin. Here we have a sailor mail posted aboard Maddox on September 2nd, 1945. By Edward McDonald. The envelope is an off Tokyo Bay marking and an embossed ship seal. Here we have the Pueblo. Famed for the Pueblo incident, her capture by the North Korean forces early in 1968. Pueblo was transferred to the Navy in 1966, signed the Oceanographic Research and converted in 1967. Entered in January of 1968 by North Korean submarine chasers and 4 torpedo boats, as well as 2 MiG aircraft while in international water. She was fired upon, killing 1 and wounding 4 crewmen. She did not return fire and was forced to halt and boarded. Only a small portion of the intelligence data aboard had been destroyed prior to the boarding of the ship. The ship was taken to Wosan, where the ship was charged with violation of North Korea's territorial waters. The crew was abused and tortured over 11 months, but were finally released in December of 1968. This is a front and back cover dated 12/24/1968, postmarked in San Diego and autographed by most, but not all, of the Pueblo crew. USS Liberty, famed for the Israeli attack on the ship in 1967, which was acquired by the Navy in 1964, converted to a technical research ship for evaluating electronics and communications. She was off the Sinai Peninsula 4 days into the Arab-Israeli 6-day war. The Israeli aircraft attacked the Liberty with bombs and rockets. 24 minutes later, Israeli torpedo boats hit Liberty with torpedoes. Israelis claim it had mistakenly identified the ship. However, 34 of our men were killed, 174 were wounded. Here we have a Nicholson cachet posted aboard the Liberty on July 29, 1967, commemorating her return after being damaged by Israeli forces. The cover is autographed by the Liberty CO, William L. McGonigal. Have the Nautilus, famed for her part of her voyage under the North Poles, the first by any submarine, was the first nuclear-powered ship. She was the brainchild of Hyman Rickover, and in January of 1955, Nautilus was underway on nuclear power. On July of 1958, Nautilus began Operation Sunshine, the first submerged voyage under the North Pole, sailing the Bering Strait in the Barrow Sea Valley. The sub passed under the North Pole on August 3rd, 1958. She surfaced near Spitzenberg Island and signaled Nautilus 90 degrees north. Above, on the left, we have a cover posted aboard the Nautilus on September 30, 1954, commemorating her commissioning in the first atomic ship. To the right, we have a number 10 cover posted aboard the Nautilus on August 3rd, 1958, commemorating the ship's arrival at the North Pole. The cachet was designed to be done in two parts by crew members Frank Holland and George Krosowski. Only when the two parts were combined does this cachet show the submarine at the North Pole. Cover is autographed by the CO, William Anderson. The Turner Joy, also famous for the Tonkin Gulf incident. Turner Joy was ordered to support Maddox, but arrived too late to engage. Left, we have the cachet cover posted aboard the Turner Joy on August 3rd, 1959, to commemorate the commissioning of the ship. In the lower right, there's a photo of the ship. Now we're into the modern Navy. Triton, famed for her submergence and circumnavigation of the world. We have a cover that's posted aboard the Triton to commemorate the circumnavigation in 1960. The cachet is in Latin and translate, "Hail, noble captain, it is done again," which references Magellan's circumnavigation of the world in 1519. The cover was specifically autographed for David by 13 sailors that were aboard during the trip. The cachet was designed by Lieutenant Thomas B. Tongue, Triton's Auxiliary Division. We have the George Washington, famed for being the first nuclear ballistic submarine. In July 1960, George Washington, loaded with 2 Polaris missiles, conducted the first Polaris missile launch from a submerged submarine at a target 1,100 miles downrange. Submarine CO James Osborne signaled to President Eisenhower, "Polaris from out of the deep to target." Perfect. The shakedown was completed on July 30th when George Washington took on a full load of Polaris missiles, with Blue Crew manning the ship for her first deployment. This is a cachet cover dated January 1961, posted from the George Washington, commemorating completion of the first deterrent patrol by the George Washington Blue Crew. Cover is autographed by the CO James Osborne. Here we have the Scorpion, famed for her mysterious loss, the second U.S. Navy nuclear submarine loss during peacetime operations. Scorpion was used to develop anti-submarine warfare tactics. The submarine departed on a Mediterranean cruise in February of 68 until May of 68, then set course back for Norfolk. May 21st, it radioed that it was in position 50 miles south of the Azores, the speed at 28 knots submerged. And 6 days later, she was reported overdue. Investigation confirmed that an underwater implosion took place on 5/21/68, some 400 miles southwest of the Azores. The wreckage of the submarine was located over 10,000 feet down. This is a cover from the Scorpion on May 17, 68, only a few days before her loss, with a rubber stamp ship's cachet postmarked on the subtender Canopus. On the left, we have a photo mosaic of the sail of the Scorpion showing from the starboard side. Top center is the periscope and carrying masts. The photos were taken in October of '68 when the ship was found. Of the Thresher, also famous for her loss, who spent the entire career running trials. Unnumbered Becachet, dated January 18th, 1963, postmarked Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and is autographed by Harvey, who was a CO when Thresher was lost. It's dark. Famous for the Iraqi missile attack on the ship in May of 1987. They were on patrol off of Bahrain on a mission to protect shipping in the Persian Gulf. The upper left, we have a photo of the Stark listing to port after being struck by a missile. And down below, we have a number 10 penalty cover posted aboard the Stark on May 14th, 1987, just 3 days before the attack. Ends. Famed for her actions while in the Persian Gulf in 1988. In July of '88, Iranian gunboats attacked a Pakistani merchant ship, and Vincennes sent in a helicopter to investigate, which was fired upon. Vincennes engaged the gunboat, sinking them. However, she had crossed into Iranian waters. Only 5 minutes later, an aircraft was detected taking off from Bandar Abbas Airport. Vincennes radioed warnings to the aircraft but failed to do so on a civilian frequency. As there was no response, the aircraft was misidentified as the hostile F-14, which was descending towards the ship. 2 missiles were fired, and the Iranian Airbus A300 civilian jet en route to Dubai, which was actually climbing from 12,500 feet. All civilians aboard were killed. Human error was blamed, and the captain retired. Here we have a cover dated July 3rd, 1988, posted aboard the Vincennes the day the Airbus was shot down. The cover was prepared by the Decatur chapter of the USGS. That is both parts of this presentation. The ships included were from the book Ships of the World, a historical encyclopedia, and reflect the history of the U.S. Navy from humble beginnings to the largest, strongest Navy in the world. Along the way, there were instances of extreme bravery and sacrifice, as well as infamous events. The book had to pick and choose which ships to include, and there are many omissions, such as the Gmelina, the Cairo, the Louisiana during the Civil War, destroyer Ward, which fired the first shot against the Japanese at Pearl Harbor, battleships Oklahoma and Utah lost at Pearl Harbor, submarines Archerfish, Darter, Seawolf, and Trigger, battleship in New Jersey, and the U.S. Navy airships. The book, however, succeeds in communicating the fact that the U.S. Navy, despite some less than competent officers at times, reflects the character of the nation. And that's it.